Now let's get started with SketchUp Free. I'm using the Chrome browser, so my interface looks like this. SketchUp Free can be used on other browsers, so if you're using a different browser, your interface may look slightly different than what you see here. Now, one of the first things I want to do is just maximize SketchUp Free so I get the most out of my screen. So I can do that by hitting the F11 key. And when I do, all of my browser tabs go away and SketchUp Free takes up the entire screen. Now, if I want to get out of this mode, I can do it in one of two ways. The first method is to simply tap F11 again, and that brings you back to your browser. If you go back into full screen mode, you can also press and hold the escape key. And you need to hold that for just a second or two in order for that to work. So I find that F11 is actually a little bit faster. Now, the SketchUp interface is pretty straightforward. You have four main items here in the interface. Along the top, we have our main menu bar, and if you press on this here in the top left corner, you'll see we have our standard menu. So we can create a new file, open existing files either from Trimble Connect or my device. We can save, import, export, and so on. Now we also have along the left-hand side a toolbar. And this gives you things such as search. So this allows you to search SketchUp for tools or help or whatever. Plus we have a number of tools in this toolbar. So if you hover over these, they'll tell you what the tool is. In this case, it's the eraser, the line tool, rectangle tool, and so on. Now, if you go all the way down, you'll see we have these three dots along the bottom. If you left click on those, you'll see we have a lot more tools in here. So this is really just the most commonly used tools, plus you get a whole other library of tools here. Now, along the right, we have what are called panels. Now, these give you things such as help, other information about the scene, and give you more discrete control about how you use SketchUp. Now, one of the first things you can do is that if you notice you have this little expand bar, and if you left click on that, it actually gives you the names of all of these. So it's kind of its own little help system. So if I were to click on, say, the instructor, you'll see that this expands, and this gives me basically my help system. So whatever tool I have selected, so if I were to select, say, the line tool, notice how that changes. If I select the select tool here by left clicking on it, you get that. Now you can close these by just clicking on this icon in the top right corner, or you can have multiple ones of these open. So for example, if I have, say, entity info and the outliner open, you'll notice that both of those show up on the screen. Now, if you click on a lot of these, you'll see that it can really take up the entire screen. So you can scroll up or down. And then typically what I do is I just tend to keep these closed until I need them. And then I hide the little help system there. Now along the bottom, we have a help line. And this basically gives you instructions for how to use any individual tool. So if I click on a different tool, notice how that changes. And then along the bottom right, we have what's called a measurements box. And that just allows you to type in specific dimensions for objects as you create them. So as you can see, the interface is pretty straightforward, and you'll get the hang of it very quickly as we start to use SketchUp Free. The interface in SketchUp Free can be customized to some degree, so let me show you a little bit about that. Now, one of the first things we want to do is we can set up our settings. So if we go to our main menu here and click in the top left, you'll see we have App Settings. And this gives us a number of different settings that we can use to customize how SketchUp looks and behaves. Now, the first tab up here along the left is called General, and this basically allows us to set up things such as autosave, how many minutes between saves, and so on. We can also change our language. So obviously I'm using English, but you can use any number of different languages. And then really important is your default template. Now, I'm using architectural feet and inches, but you can also use just fractional inches, decimal inches or feet, as well as metric measurements. So however you like to work, you can set SketchUp Free up to use that. Now, in addition, we have an accessibility tab. This basically just changes your default colors, so in case you need to change those. And then we also have ways to change navigation. Now, I'm using a mouse with SketchUp Free, but if you're on a laptop, you may want to use a trackpad. And when you select trackpad, you can change how two-finger swipe works. So you can change it from orbit, pan, or zoom. Now, I'm going to change this back to mouse because that's what I'm using. And then we can also do things such as invert the direction of zoom, orbit, or pan, as well as change our sensitivity. Now, another way to customize SketchUp Free is to customize the toolbar. Now, remember when we viewed it last, if you click on these three dots, you get all of these other tools. Now, what if one of those tools was something you wanted to use a lot? Let's say we wanted to use the circle tool a lot. Well, we could just click and drag that into the main toolbar so it's always there. So all I have to do is hover over circle, left click and drag, and then just position it where I want. I'm going to position it just under the rectangle. And when I do, it's no longer in this, it's actually on the toolbar. So you can't find the circle here, it's here. Now we can just left click and drag it back off and put it back where we found it. And I'm going to do that for now, just so that we have the default interface. Now, another way to customize this is to just press the Edit key, and this will allow us to basically rearrange how all of these tools work. So if you want things in different places or if you want to organize them differently, you can do that. You can also add things such as new tool slots or separators to truly reorganize how this works. So I'm, again, going to leave this as the default, and we'll go from there. So as you can see, you can customize the SketchUp Free interface to make it better work for you. SketchUp Free is a web-based application, but you can load files either from your Trimble Connect account, which is a cloud-based storage solution, or from your local hard drive. So let's take a look at how to load files and also how to move files into Trimble Connect. So I'm going to go to my main menu here, left click, and just go over to Open. Now we have two places to retrieve files. One is Trimble Connect, and that's Trimble's cloud service. Or you can go to My Device. So let's start on My Device. Now I have my exercise files on my desktop. If I double click on that, you'll see I have a whole bunch of files. I'm going to select 0103.skp and click Open. And that brings me into that file. Now, it says here that you are viewing a temporary file. Now, if I want to use this interactively, then I will need to save it to my Trimble account. We can do that in one of two places. We can go into File, do a Save As, or you can just press this Save button here. And this should bring you into your Trimble account, your Trimble Connect account, and bring you into, and there should be a SketchUp folder there. So if I double click on that, you'll see that right now it's kind of empty, and I can give it a model name. Well, I'm just going to give it that same name, 0103, and hit Save here. Now that's saved to my account, and it's telling me it is saved. Now, if I go to Open and go to Trimble Connect, you'll see that that file is now there. Now, if you want to, you can also manage your Trimble Connect account from a browser. So I'm going to go into my browser, which in this case is Chrome, and I've already logged into Trimble Connect. So if you go over to Trimble and go to Products, Trimble Connect, you can log in. And once you're logged in, you should get a window that looks something like this. And then you can just double click on SketchUp, and you'll see that we have this file here. Now, if you want to, you can literally click and drag from your hard drive into this account to just upload everything in one big batch. So you need to click on this folder and go Open Explorer. And that shows me that I have that one file in there. And if I want to, I can add to that. So I can go Add, Upload Files. Now I can drag and drop from my computer, or I can select Browse. And I'm just going to go ahead and browse over to my exercise files. And you can select one or more of these and just upload as many as you want to your Trimble account, just as long as you don't exceed their limits. So if I click Open here, it's going to take a while to upload all of these. So it's now uploading these. And you can see it's going to start uploading to my account. So now everything can be on your Trimble Cloud account. And this might be an easier way to access those files. So if I were to go back into SketchUp, go File, Open Trimble Connect, there's all of my files. So all I have to do is find the one I want, load it up, and there I go. Or I can continue to load from my local hard drive if I want. One of the nicest features of SketchUp is that it provides a whole wealth of 3D models that you can use. And these are all free. They're located in what's called the 3D warehouse. Now, the easiest way to get to these is to simply go over to your panels and find the one that says 3D warehouse. It's this icon, and just left click on it. And what this does is it brings you into the 3D warehouse. And this allows you to search for content, or you can just browse. Now, another place you can get it is to go into a browser and go to 3dwarehouse.sketchup.com. And that will bring you into a window that's very similar to the one you see within SketchUp Free. Now we're going to use the SketchUp Free interface, so let's go ahead to our 3D warehouse, and then let's just search for content. So I'm going to type in, let's say, chair, and hit search. And this brings up all sorts of different chairs. Now I have a couple of things I can do. I can go through different catalogs, collections. I can also search for materials, which you'll be using once you get into adding textures and materials to your objects. But I'm going to go back to models. We also have filters, so you can go for all results, specific products, models, different categories. So if you want, you can search within furniture or interior design or whatever. Now, if you want to, you can also refine this a little bit more. You can type something, say, like office chair or something like that and search for that, and you should get a different set of results. So once you have an object that you want to download, all you have to do is go over here, and you'll see a download link. Left-click on that, and it should bring that into your scene. Now, if you move your mouse, you'll see you can position this wherever you want, and once you left-click, it anchors it. And then all you have to do is hit Escape to get out of that mode. Now, this particular model is in my scene, and I can use it however I want. Or I can use it as a basis for creating another model. So if this isn't exactly the way you want, you can always remodel these to your tastes. Now, the 3D warehouse is a great way to get both models and materials for use in your SketchUp projects. Navigation is one of the most important things you need to learn in SketchUp. It allows you to move around the scene and see exactly what you're doing as you work. So let's take a look at the navigation tools in SketchUp Free. Now, they're located along the left toolbar here. And I'm just going to go to the first one here, which is Orbit. Now, if you notice, the hotkey for that is the letter O. So go ahead and select Orbit. And when you do, notice how your pointer changes to this icon. Now, all you have to do is just left-click and drag. And you can orbit through your scene to see exactly what you want. Now, if you notice here in the bottom left-hand corner, we have drag to orbit, shift equals pan, control equals suspend gravity. So let's go ahead and try that. So if we hit the shift key, notice how the pointer changes to this pan tool. So if I hold down shift and left click, I can pan around the scene. So basically, let up on shift, I can orbit, hold down shift, I can pan. Now, if I hold down control, it does what's called suspend gravity. Now, SketchUp really wants to keep the ground flat. So as I orbit, it keeps that ground flat and that vertical axis vertical. Now, if you hold down control, you can change that. So if I left click over here, you can see how I can tumble a little bit more interactively. Now, this might not work for this architectural scene, but if you're working with something like a mechanical object, that may be useful. Now, once I let go of control and left click again, notice how it goes back to trying to keep it vertical. So SketchUp really wants to keep that ground flat, but control overrides that. Now, the next tool we want to use is the pan tool, which is right below here, and the hotkey for that is H, and I like to refer to that as the hand, which is really the icon for this. And we just use this with the orbit tool, but you can use it by itself as well. All you have to do is left click and drag, and you can work with this. Now, I like using this a lot because if you middle click while in the pan tool, you can orbit. So this allows me to do a standard orbit, and then I can pan. So this is a great way to quickly navigate your scene. And also, if you have a mouse with a middle scroll wheel, you can just roll that scroll wheel to zoom in and out. So again, you can left click to pan, middle click to orbit, and then roll that wheel to zoom. So I like using this. This is probably my preferred method of navigating in SketchUp. Now, finally, the last tool we have is called the zoom tool. Now, it's down here. It looks like a magnifying glass, and the hotkey for that is the letter Z or Z. And very similar, all you have to do is left click and drag, and you can zoom in and out of your scene. Now, there are a couple of other zoom tools, and those are hidden down here in the additional tools. So we have zoom, but we also have what's called zoom extents and zoom window. So let's start with zoom window, and this will zoom into a specific window that we draw. So let's go ahead and click on that. And now this allows me to draw a box over a section of the scene, and SketchUp will zoom to what's in that box. Now, if we go to zoom extents, what that does is that will go ahead and frame everything in the scene. So go ahead and practice navigating your scenes, and you'll find it's fairly intuitive, and you should get the hang of it fairly easily. Another way to navigate your scenes is to simply walk and look around. Now, this is more applicable to architectural type scenes, but it's a very useful way to navigate. And it's really good for architectural walkthroughs and stuff like that. So these tools work with a couple of these tools here out in the extended tools. So we have position camera, look around, and walk. So everything here starts with position camera. So I'm going to go ahead and left click on that. Notice how my icon changes to this little camera on a tripod. So I'm going to go ahead and position that right around the front of that walkway. And so what it does is it basically just puts a camera on that walkway. It gives me this little eye icon, which is essentially the look around icon. So if I left click and drag, I can look around. Now, the height of my camera is determined in the bottom right-hand corner. Now, this is basically what's known as a measurements box. So if I want to, I can just start typing numbers and I can change the height of my camera. So if I type the number 6, notice how that changes, and that is essentially 6 feet. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. Oops, that's 6 inches. Let's go ahead and type in 6 feet. There we go. And now that allows me to look around from that height. Now I can basically just look left, right, up, and down. Now the next thing we want to do is essentially walk. So we can select the walk tool, and notice again how my icon changes. If I left click and drag, I can drag down to move back, drag up to move forward. If I drag left and right, it's more like a pan, so I can basically look around. If I hold down the Shift key, I can walk left or right, so essentially repositioning that camera. And if I hit down the Control key, I can basically move faster, so they call it a run. Now, one of the nice things about the walk tool is that it does respect your geometry, so you can't walk through walls. So if I wanted to say walk towards this door, notice how once I get to that door, it stops. So I'm going to back up a little bit. Now, if we want to, we can hold the Alt key, and that will allow me to walk through walls. And there we go. So now I'm inside the house, and I can just left click and drag and look around. Now, another thing about these tools is that it does also allow you to use your standard tools, such as orbit or pan. So if I hit the O key to orbit, I can orbit my scene. I can hit H for pan, and I can use all of my standard tools as well. So walk and look around are really nice tools for going through architectural scenes. So go ahead and play with those and get used to using those as well. When you work in SketchUp Free, there are many times when you'll need a standard view, such as a front view or a top view. You may also need to change how the scene looks, so you may need an orthographic projection where everything is parallel, kind of like a drafting view. You can get to all of these using what's called the Scenes panel. So let's go over to our right and open up our panels and find the one that says Scenes. So I'm going to left click on this, and it should open up this panel. Now, it may be collapsed for you, but basically we want to make sure that Standard Views is open. And this just gives us easy access to these standard views. So if I go to South Elevation Front, it gives me this view. I can also get a top view. And if this view isn't exactly what you want, you can change it. So I can roll my middle mouse button to zoom out if I need to frame this a little bit differently. Or I can use my pan tool to reposition it or orbit around it. And I can basically just put it back to whatever view I want, and then just quickly click on one of these to get whatever elevation I need. Now, these elevations are still in perspective, so we don't really have that parallel projection that you might get from a true drafting front view. Now, you can change this using the camera rollout. So if you click on this and roll this out, you'll see we have three options here. We have perspective, we have parallel projection, which is an orthographic view, and two-point perspective. So let's go ahead and click on parallel projection, and you'll see that this is basically an orthographic projection. So if I go to my pan tool, I can pan and zoom, and notice how the perspective doesn't change. Now, if I orbit out of this, you'll see that I'm getting basically what's called an isometric view. And if I want, I can also change this projection. So if I change it to a two-point perspective, it's going to be more like a drawn two-point perspective. And if you click on perspective, that's more of a true perspective. Now, with perspective and two-point perspective, you can change your field of view. So that's basically how wide or narrow the camera is. So if you want a wide-angle camera, you can go to a larger field of view. If you want to go more towards an orthographic or parallel projection, you can just dial that down. So if I were to go, say, to a south elevation and dial my field of view down, notice how I'm basically getting the same as parallel projection. But I find it's easier to keep this field of view kind of somewhere in the middle, somewhere around 40 or so. And then just, if I need parallel projection, just click on that. But there are a number of different ways to change the way you view your scene in terms of projection, in terms of field of view, as well as using all of these standard elevations. So these are some very quick ways to get the scene looking exactly the way you want. Sometimes it's handy to have your own standard scenes that you can jump to and from in SketchUp. And we can do this using the Scenes panel. So let's go ahead to our Scenes panel. And you'll notice we've already used camera and standard views. But at the very bottom, you'll see we have another rollout called My Scenes. And this allows you to create custom views of your work and save them out so you can jump between them very quickly. So here I have a fairly standard perspective view of my work. So let's go ahead and just hit the plus, and that will add that to the scene. So if I were to, say, navigate off of this, all I have to do is double click on that, and it goes back to that exact view. Now, if I want to change this, I can do that by clicking on these three dots here, and we can edit, update, or delete. So if I were to edit this, it brings up this whole Scenes Properties panel, and I can give it a new name. So let's just give this the name of Perspective. We can give it a description. We can include it or not include it in animation. We can also change or save all sorts of other things, such as shadows and those sorts of things. So I'm going to go ahead and just click OK. And all we've really done is change that name. Now, if I were to navigate off of this and just click on these dots, I could also update that scene. So we want to update, for example, camera location or any other setting. Go ahead and click OK. And now that's my new scene. So if I were to go somewhere else and then click on that, you get back to perspective. Now we can have as many scenes as we want in my scene. So let's go to a standard view. Let's go ahead maybe to a front elevation with a parallel projection. And now the My Scenes button is actually moved towards the top here. So all I have to do now is hit Add Scene up here. And now it adds that scene. So now I can go to my perspective view or my front view. Now, if we want, we can add in another scene. Let's go ahead and say maybe add in a top view. Make sure that's parallel projection and hit plus, add scene. So now I've got three scenes. I've got my front elevation, my top, as well as perspective. Now, one of the things you're noticing is that it takes a while to go from one of these to the other. We can change that using this animation settings icon. So what we're doing here is we're actually animating between these. Now, if you don't want to animate, all you have to do is turn that transition time down to 0 and click OK. Now, it just snaps from one to the other, and that makes it a lot easier when you're working. But if you want to present, you can use this to basically create pauses in animation. So let's say I want 2 seconds transition, and I want a delay time of 1 second. Hit OK. All you have to do now is hit this play scenes, and it will go from one to the other. So notice how it goes from that one to that one, and then back. So this is a great way to do presentations. You can just animate between these different views. But typically when I work and I want to snap very quickly between these, I'll turn that animation settings down to 0. So again, this is just another way to quickly go between some standard views that you define within SketchUp Free. Now let's take a look at some other ways to customize your views. We're going to look at shadows, fog, as well as display options in SketchUp Free. So let's go over to our panels, and I want to click on Display. Now this allows me to hide and unhide objects, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But we also can turn on things such as section cuts axes. So for axes, notice how we have these axes in the scene, the red, green, and blue lines. If I want to, I can turn those on or off. And if you're doing a presentation, typically you'll want those off so you can have just the view of your work. You can also hide things such as components. Now, more visually interesting is the shadows rollout. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my shadows panel. And if I turn on shadows, you'll notice that I get shadows in the scene. So I can change time of day. I can change the date, or basically the month and day of the year. I can change how bright it is, as well as how dark are the shadows. So if I dial down those shadows a lot, they become black, or I can dial them up to become gray. Now we have another rollout here called fog. So if I show fog, you'll see how when I toggle it off, that horizon kind of goes away. And then I have a near and far distance. So my near distance is what I see here. Far distance is how far back from the camera it goes. So you can change that. You can also use the background color or a custom fog color. So if I want a blue fog, I can do that, or I can really just change it to whatever color I want. You can also add a location here. So when I click on that, it basically gives me Google Maps, and I can basically find wherever I want and locate it exactly where I want on planet Earth. So these are some other ways to control how your scene looks in SketchUp Free. One more way to change how you work with your model is the Model Info panel. So let's go ahead over to Panels and find Model Info. If I roll that out, you'll see we have a lot of units settings. So if I roll out length units, you can change the format of your model. So you can change it, say, from architectural to fractional or decimal, as well as from imperial to metric. You can also change area units as well as volume and so on. We can also change our text settings. So we can change our standard font. And if you're doing things such as drawing dimensioning lines, you can change things such as your endpoints, as well as how it aligns. And we can also change dimensions settings. So again, your font, as well as how it aligns. And so as we get into dimensioning, we'll go ahead and work with those. But as you can see, this is just another way to change how you view your model and your information in SketchUp Free.